I think we can go ahead and get started, just to be respectful of everyone's time. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us for our March community call. As the title kind of alludes to, we'll be focusing on the 2020 census and some resources that we created for the presidential elections this year. On the call today is me, Alyssa, our CREX field manager. And I'm also joined by a couple of my colleagues on the field team, and so I'll pass it along to them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, this is Tina Sam. I am the field director in transition at CREX, and I'm excited to be part of this call because it will be my first time as a speaker of it, and I've joined many before, so I look forward to presenting to you all.
Hi everyone, Gina here. I'm a field associate at CREX, just sort of running technical assistance to make everything run smoothly. So I apologize in advance if things are a little rocky. This is our first time doing things fully remotely. So thanks in advance for your patience.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. And yeah, as Gina said, we're all kind of in different spaces right now. So if you hear a couple next slides here and there, it's just because this is our first time doing it all remotely. So thanks, as she mentioned, for your patience. Next, we'll just go over some quick logistics, which will probably be familiar for most of you if you've been on our calls before. So you're all placed on mute right now, and to comment or chat questions, you have to be logged into the webinar, not just dialed in. And feel free to shoot those questions and comments to us throughout the webinar, but we'll be addressing those at the end during the Q&A section. We also wanted to point your attention to the handouts section of the webinar panel. There you'll find a couple of PDFs, including a copy of this presentation, so no need to memorize anything or take notes necessarily. And we'll also be sharing a recording of this after it's done as well, so you can share it with your colleagues who might not be able to make it. But other than that, I'll just go ahead and get started. So this first question, as we always do, is just getting to know where folks on the line are joining us from. So Gina will drop the poll, and we'll give folks a minute or two to tell us. All right, another 15 seconds or so. Awesome. Let's see what we got. Oh, great. Okay, so we have folks from everywhere. So a quarter from the East Coast, 43% from the West Coast, so thanks for joining us during your lunch hour. Almost 20% from the Midwest, and even some Southern representation, and even from others. So if you're from other, quote unquote, shoot us a chat and tell us where you are, and we can hopefully include you as a choice next time. Awesome. So we'll go on to our next poll. So this is just to get a gauge of who's a newcomer and who might be more familiar. So this one is just about how many community calls of ours have you attended before. So we'll open this poll and give folks another minute or so. All right, another 10 seconds. Okay, let's see what we got. All right, so for 37%, this is your first call, so welcome. Hopefully it won't be your last. For over a quarter, this is either your 5th or 6th or 7th, so thanks for sticking around for all those. and then we have a couple of folks who come into the middle. So again, thank you. I know everyone's super busy, so we really appreciate when you join our calls, and hopefully we'll continue to see you. All right. Our next question is just getting a sense of who's on the line. I recognize a few names, but just wanted to see what capacity are you joining us today? So are you from a CBO? Are you from a national org? Are you staff or advocate or just an organizer, a student, or someone else? So we'll give folks another 40 seconds maybe. All right, final 10 seconds or so. Okay, let's see what we got. All right, so more than half are CBO staff. So thanks for joining. I know you all are having a lot of work on your hands, and hope everyone is staying safe regardless of where you fall in these categories. We have some national org folks, some community advocates and organizers as well, some students, which is great to see, and others. So again, if you're a part of that other category, shoot us a chat, and hopefully we can have our poll be more inclusive of you next time. Great. So that wraps up the kind of intro polls that you all might be used to. So next, I'll just run down the agenda for today's call. So we'll start with the, the major updates that everyone's inbox is flooded with right now, which is COVID-19. We'll then go into census operations, which is undoubtedly affected by that. Next, we're proud to launch CRAC's voter guide for the 2020 presidential election. So we'll go over what that resource looks like. And then we'll talk about the 45th anniversary resolution, just to kind of drum up some attention and awareness about it to hopefully set it up for success when it rolls out. And then as usual, we'll end with Q&A and comments at the end. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with COVID-19 updates. So first, just another poll for you all about what the impacts are that you're seeing in your communities. So we're really just doing this assessment to really hear from folks on the ground so we can assess where we can best support. We'll give folks a minute or so to check any or all of the following choices. All right, final 10 seconds or so to get your votes in. All right, let's see what we got. Okay, so every single choice has at least passes you saying it's an impact in your community. So definitely we're going to take this into account as we kind of assess our strategy, what needs to shift, where we really need to lend support to our partners on the ground. So thanks for sharing. And now I will pass it to Sina to share about the economic stimulus package.
Thank you, Alyssa. I'll go ahead and coming from last survey, we will revisit some resources. There is a tab for that later, but I am going to just cover some of the updates coming from Congress with the economic stimulus package and impact of COVID-19 to the economy and to folks in the country. So Congress has been debating on an economic stimulus package this week to support Americans struggling from the impact of COVID-19. And after much debate, it looks like our leaders have come to a deal last night. The Senate unanimously approved a $2 trillion coronavirus emergency package. While this also includes good provisions that will help struggling families and communities, such as billions in $1,200 payments to Americans, bigger unemployment checks, $950 billion for federal loan programs, and additional funding to support federal, state, and local health agencies. We also recognize some of the bill's shortcomings include some concerns with immigrants still being excluded from these benefits. And it doesn't prevent the lawsuit currently going into play still against the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which threatens health coverage for many people. The House is scheduled to vote on this bill tomorrow, so we anticipate that it will likely pass unanimously, but we will keep on top of the updates to share out if there are any changes. We hope that this bill provides relief to millions of struggling families during these dark times, but we also remember those whose safety and their health are likely still at stake as a result of the pandemic, has been exposed more so from the administration's temporary Band-Aid solutions. So we know that addressing inequity in the United States is still needed, and we'll continue to urge our elected leaders to continue fighting for systemic change that will support low-income refugee families during this crisis and other immigrant communities and beyond. So that's updates right now with the economic stimulus package, and we'll keep folks posted from CRAC with any other updates. I'll go ahead and let Alyssa continue.
Thanks, Sina. But yeah, as Sina mentioned, we'll be keeping folks updated on that. But in the meantime, as we kind of monitor that situation and assess what our strategy will be moving forward, just wanted to share some resources that the community has, rolled out in response. So just wanted to uplift any hate crime reporting. So the guidance that we've received is to report the incident to local law enforcement. And when you're filing police reports, this guidance is from the Human Rights Campaign to get your responding officer's name and badge number, make sure that an incident report form is filed and there's a case number, and get your own copy, even if it's just a preliminary report. And especially for these type of incidents that are occurring now, if it was bias motivated, let the officer know to check the hate bias motivation or hate crime incident box on the report, just so that is collected, that data is collected. Other organizations in the API space have actually encouraged folks to report to them as well to help educate the public on what's happening. So we've included some links here on this slide with some report forms. The Asian Pacific Policy and the Planning Council form actually has the forms in a few more languages as well. And these links are all included in the handout section. There's a document that Gina made with all of the links so that you can kind of just reference that one doc for all the links that we share throughout this presentation. In addition, there are some funding opportunities that have popped up. For one example is the California Wellness Foundation, who recently just announced $4 million in grant funding, $3 million of which will help to support frontline health workers, economically disadvantaged people, immigrants, seniors, and Asian Americans experiencing race-based harassment and assault. And then they will also commit $1 million to community clinics and the associates that advocate for them. So that's just one opportunity. And we'll continue to share with our partners as different funding opportunities arise, especially in different areas. But just wanted to share those out on the call. And next week or so, Sina has been working on a compilation of COVID-19 resources that we can share with folks. So we'll try to include those updates there as well. And as usual, if you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot them in the chat box, and we can get to those at the end too. All right, but for now, I will shift to 2020 census operations, which undoubtedly, as I mentioned, is going to be affected by the coronavirus changes. But just wanted to start off with the current status. So by now, households would have received an invitation in the mail to complete the census. So this is uninterrupted by anything with COVID-19. This has all been planned, all these mailings. The online questionnaire is live, and you can complete your census online or over the phone in English and 12 non-English languages, including Vietnamese. So that is all running and up and running right now. To date, or at least as of last night when I checked, 26% of households have responded so far. And that link will actually let you check out the response rates for your state or community. So that is a hard-to-count map that has been compiled by CUNY, I believe City University of New York. Hopefully that's correct. But yeah, they have been compiling the 2020 census self-response rates. So you can check out and keep a track on how your community is being counted or not. And I also wanted to continue to plug CRAC census websites. So if you're looking for information that is specific to the SCA community, can visit our website for in-language fact sheets and videos in Southeast Asian languages, including Hmong, Khmer, Lao, Mien, and Vietnamese. Next, we will just a little bit more reiterating what's on Census website. So that'll have Census 101, hard to count data, some shareables, translated resources like I mentioned, and it's basically for anyone like you all who are obviously invested enough to join this call, so anyone helping to get out the count, the SCA counts for 2020. It includes all these things, so this is just a little deeper dive into what's on there. Some of these FAQs will continue to update and make changes to based on how things have shifted based on the coronavirus, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here. But it also includes pledge to be counted, sign up to be a census ambassador, and all that stuff that you can share with your community members. So now we'll take a quick poll. Have you all filled out your census yet? So we'll give folks maybe 45 seconds to let us know. All right, last 10 seconds or so. Okay, let's see what we got. All right, so 2/3 have said yes, so great. Thank you for being counted. And then 33, so just a third, not yet. So make sure you do that. And again, if you want to check out that link, you can see how your community stacks up to maybe this participation rate. So hopefully on our next call in April, we can have closer to 100%. Awesome. So next, wanted to for sure share out on how COVID-19 has impacted 2020 census operations. So like I mentioned, during this period, households can still respond without having to meet anyone in person. So that means you can respond online, over the phone, or when those census packets come in the mail to folks who haven't responded yet, you can send that in without ever having to meet anyone in person. So that's the top line message that we want folks to reiterate, is that it's never been easier to fill out the census from the comfort of your own home. So that's something you can kind of reassure your community members about, that you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't, for public health, if you don't want to be in contact with anyone, you don't have to be to fill out the census. So Inevitably, the U.S. Census Bureau has adjusted their operations in order to protect their employees' health and safety as well as ours, and just to make sure that the guidance from health authorities is implemented and they're all in accordance to that. But again, their main goal and objective is to get a complete and accurate count of all the communities as well. So timeline-wise, this is an old graphic that you might recognize from our January community call. So it's just been tweaked a little bit based on some of the new updates. So as you can see, enumerators visiting non-responsive households has been delayed to May 14th, and the deadline to respond is now extended to August 14th. What hasn't changed is, as you can see, the mailing that's happening throughout this month and official census day, which is April 1st, so this coming Wednesday. And what also hasn't changed so far is the December 31st, 2020 date, which is when those population totals are due to the president. And in a little bit more detail on the next slide, you'll see where those changes really are. So as I mentioned, the self-response phase, so online, phone, or mail, that's extended through August 14th. It was previously the end of July, but now we have until mid-August for that. Mobile questionnaire assistance, though, has been delayed to not start until mid-April, and then that'll extend through the 8/14 deadline as well. Other delays have to do a lot with the enumeration processes. So early non-response follow-up, so this was for college and university students who live in the off-campus housing. So that has been delayed to April 14th as well. And then regular non-response follow-up has been pushed back to April 28th, so the end of April. And both of those wrap up around August 14th as well. The group quarters, so this is student housing, nursing facilities, military barracks, correctional facilities. That is delayed until April 16th, and that'll go on until June 19th. Transitory locations, so these are motels, RVs, campgrounds, that'll start April 23rd and go through mid-May, so May 18th. And then service-based locations, so this is where a lot of the enumeration of folks experiencing homelessness occurs. So these are like soup kitchens and shelters. That enumeration has been delayed until April 29th. And then for folks experiencing homelessness, the enumeration of outdoor locations is May 1st. We also wanted to reiterate and continue to debunk the rumor that has been floating around that census responses will be used to mail your stimulus checks from the package that the Congress will pass. So just wanted to reiterate that that is not true, and your responses won't affect any benefits you receive from the stimulus package. The Census Bureau can't even release your info for 72 years to be able to do that. So just wanted to take time here to debunk that. Next, just wanted to answer some questions that maybe you have yourselves or community members might be asking you. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, a lot of college students are back at home because their universities have, canceled classes for the rest of the semester. So if you know folks in your community who are in that situation, you can let them know that students living away from home at school should be counted at school in most cases, even if they're temporarily elsewhere due to COVID-19. So this rule of where they live and sleep most of the time still applies. So the Census Bureau is even reaching out to schools to contact their students and remind them to respond. So that is for folks who are students who live off campus. They should be responding online. For folks who live on campus in like dormitories or designated student housing, they'll still be counted through their university through the group quarters enumeration processes, but it's those students who maybe are living off campus now but are back at their parents' homes because of COVID-19. They should be responding to the census online with their usual residence address. Additionally, another situation that might be common is folks who are maybe staying somewhere else or with family during this time. So I know folks who, for example, left New York and are staying with family here because it'll probably be easier to get treated or it won't be as hectic here. So situations like that, those folks I've heard don't have that invitation that they would have received in the mail. So they can still respond online, just like those college students, using non-ID response. So what that is you go online and you just say you don't have your ID, and it'll ask you to provide your address. And additional instructions are attached actually in the handout section about this non-ID response process. But basically, it's still your for sure way of getting counted and making sure that you are not missed in the count. So again, the criteria of where you live and sleep most of the time applies. So just across the board, still trying to maintain that criteria so the data doesn't get skewed because of COVID-19. And again, if you have additional questions on that, shoot them to us in the chat function and hopefully we can take care of them at the end. Next, we'll go over ways to still get out the count. So if you're like us, and I'm sure a lot of you are, you know that the work still has to get done, especially since the 2020 census is going to impact everything for the next 10 years. So we want to just encourage folks to continue to uplift the importance of responding and really drive home that $1.5 trillion figure every year. And just also reiterate that it's easy to do and you can do it from the comfort of your own home. So everyone is, hopefully staying safe and at home anyways, if they can. So just reiterating that the census is still easy to respond to in that way. And as many of you have already done, pivoting your in-person plans to digital. So phone banking instead of canvassing, doing a Facebook Live, doing a video or conference call with your community members, or creating social media videos or PSAs that you can easily share out digitally. Other ways, just more specifically to this week, it's actually the Census Week of Action that a lot of the national API orgs are coalescing around. So that is now through official Census Day, April 1st. And there's a digital toolkit available, which we have circulated in the links of that on that link document that is in the handout section. So that toolkit has everything from posts, tweets, graphics that you can use on your own social media platforms. Another way to just participate in that campaign is to share photos of you getting counted or filling out your census. Take a quick pic of you doing the online response form or anything like that, and using the hashtags and just plugging into the campaign that way. Post it on your Instagram story, put it on your Facebook, and encourage other folks in your networks to get counted as well. There are a lot of groups also who are offering advice as to how to adjust your programs during this situation. So one coming up is actually this coming Tuesday, the 31st, and it will be led by Tim Lim from Lim Consulting Services about how you can adjust your programs and come at it with a digital and SMS angle. So those are just some resources and opportunities we've compiled so far, but we'll continue to engage you all as 2020 census operations continue. Next, I'll turn it to Sina to kind of spotlight a group near and dear to her heart, actually.
Thank you, Alyssa. I am so thrilled to be able to spotlight the My Anti-Deportation Advocacy Group, which is based out of Seattle, Tacoma, Washington, my hometown. I have done very intimate work with the group, but since all the work has removed remotely as you've gone over with COVID-19 Impact, census work is definitely impacted there too, with canvassing and in-person events being canceled, unfortunately. But CAGE, which is short for the group's name, has been active in moving quickly a lot of the pieces for outreach to social media and reaching out, making phone calls. In the past, I know the group had a timeline of outreach work, and with a quick response in altering that timeline, now the focus is in phone calls and social media on Facebook, Instagram, and it's with everyone on the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington impacted by stay-at-home orders. It's been helpful to actually get information out. I've heard from the group to enlist community members to learn how to get counted remotely online. So that option, whether you have your envelope in the mail with your census ID number, you're able to go online to mycensus.gov and click on the start the questionnaire and fill out your address and continue from there. And I know a lot of the YouTube videos and translated materials has really helped the group out in terms of outreaching to elders and other community members who prefer YouTube as a way of getting updates in the Khmer community. So I am so excited that they're able to continue their census outreach work as well as cover the areas in which advocacy is still needed for deportation issues. So shout out to Cage.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much, Sina. And yeah, a lot of our partners on the ground are doing really great work. As Sina mentioned, videos, PSAs that have gone out. I just scrolling through the attendee list right now. I know we have folks from the Cambodian family and CMAA who have both done in-language videos, which are really great. You can actually take a look at them on CRAC's website. So any video in language that we have, our partners have produced, we try to put on the website as much as we can. So there's resources there from folks like United Cambodian Community of Long Beach, all these great partners doing great work. So yeah, it's definitely possible to still get out the count, even in these remote and digital times. It's just a matter of kind of shifting strategies as needed. So speaking of shifts, we will wrap up census for now and move on to 2020 elections. So kind of seeing the end of this year if we can. I know it feels like it's been a lifetime ever since January even, but just wanted to introduce CRAC's voter guide. So this is a new resource that we created to just educate SCA community members on the presidential candidate stances on key SCA issues. So the process that we used was basically creating a questionnaire with our equity agenda policy priorities listed out and offered them a chance to kind of respond with what the candidate's viewpoint on each one was. Some of them responded, some of them didn't. So if they did not respond, that's noted in the voter guide. And the voter guide is their word-for-word responses, just condensed for space's sake, but the links to the full responses are available in the voter guide as well if you want to click on it and read through their whole response. So what did it ask? It asked questions on policy priorities in our 3 key issue areas that we work on at CRAC. So for education, we asked them about data disaggregation and data equity. We asked them about culturally relevant K-12 support and college access, affordability, and completion. For health, we asked them about access to affordable health care, culturally and linguistically appropriate mental health services, and their viewpoint on government programs to support low-income families. And finally, for immigration, we asked them about ending unjust mandatory detention and deportations and how they felt about that, their stance on strengthening naturalization programs, and also their perspective on protecting and expanding family immigration. So what it looks like, just a sneak peek, these are examples of the pages of the voter guide. So each one is broken down into what policy priority the response was. So there's a PDF version that you can download in the handout section. And that'll have all of the pages combined as one kind of voter guide PDF. To come, we will hopefully be able to optimize it for social media and produce PNG versions or JPEG versions that you can share on your platforms as well if it's helpful. So this voter guide, as you can see, includes the 3 remaining presidential candidates, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump. We did not receive responses from the Trump campaign, so you'll see that throughout the guide. We don't have their answers for that necessarily, but we do note that we didn't receive the responses. So that's just a sneak peek, and you can take a look at the full voter guide PDF in the handout section. And as usual, if you have any questions, shoot them to us in the chat box, and we can hopefully get to them at the end. But for the last section, I will pass it back to Sina, who will talk about the 45th anniversary of the community.
Thank you, Alyssa. So much going on in the country in general, but something that is very momentous is this year in 2020, coming from 2019, it is the 45 years since resettlement for our Southeast Asian communities. And for just a little historical context to explain how important this year is in commemorating the 45 years, our community comprised more than 3 million individuals who were displaced by war, conflict, and genocide from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And that was back in the 1970s. Since then, since 1975 to mid-2000s, the United States resettled over 1.2 million of our community members who were escaping the Vietnam War, persecution in Laos, and the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia. We, in effect, with that resettlement, have been the largest refugee community to ever be resettled in U.S. history, which is very important to note in terms of our importance and significance in U.S. history from the onset of our resettlement. Currently, over 3 million Southeast Asians call America home, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing any of our ethnic groups, but I do want to note even the minority groups within the Southeast Asian community include Cham folks, Hmong, Khmer, Khmer Kampuchea Kraum, Khmer Lud, Khmu, Lahu, Lao, Lumien, Montagnards, Puthai, Phnom, Thai Dam, Thai Dang, Thai Lu, and Vietnamese community members. I'm sure there are others, but I tried to include as many as I could in reference to who our community members are when we're referring to Southeast Asian Americans. 2020 commemorates the 45-year of resettlement for all of our communities, and in recognition of the sacrifices and contributions that our communities have impact in the U.S., we are wanting to present in collaboration with California Congressman Alan Lowenthal's office to hopefully sponsor some sort of bill recognizing this momentous occasion in commemorating the 45 years of resettlement for our communities. Go ahead and to the next slide. So in commemoration, we also have recognition of many of the current struggles and areas of disparity that our communities have faced since resettlement too. Our refugee communities saw families placed into communities with inadequate financial long-term resettlement support, and many of our elders and children languished in severe poverty. And so even though our community has come a long way in surviving a lot of the atrocities faced in our home countries, after 45 years, many Southeast Asian Americans have thrived and contributed greatly to economic, educational, military, political, social, and cultural significance in the United States, but we also still face a lot of economic, educational, linguistic barriers in the U.S. So as Alyssa mentioned in terms of census in her presentation earlier, such an important tool our communities can use to help make sure resources are reaching these areas of disparity that impact us. And those areas span from lack of English proficiency, educational barriers, unique health disparities, and then there's a lot of mental suffering in terms of those who are survivors of war and genocide and intergenerational trauma who also need healing and specific mental health support. We also have the issue of over 18,000 of our Southeast Asian American community members who face final orders of removals. We know over 4,000 have already been deported since 1998, and that's another area that in commemorating our 45 years, we also want to address the immediate and current issues that disproportionately impact us as well, which includes deportation. So with this bill, it is we're hoping to be able to have Congressman Alan Lonzo in California sponsor to recognize our resettlement contributions, as well as the areas in which we do need support still. And that includes in education, health, housing, language, accessibility, and I do want to mention in April, that's one of typically the most celebratory times for many of our community members celebrating New Year's, and with the crisis, we're not able to do that together at our temples and with one another. And so a way that we can definitely direct some of our efforts in celebrating the time, I hope would be to help to educate about our 45 years of being here and that we can get counted in census. We show up for voter registration, showing our, we have a lot of voting age community members who are able to vote, which as a voting bloc is at higher rates of some other groups. So I hope that is reflected too in upcoming elections, and that we try to support this bill to commemorate together in ways that we haven't come together before, now that we have option of making phone calls, getting petitions out, and emails to our legislators. I also have, lastly, something also to note moving forward, once we all, of course, successfully get through COVID-19 Impact, is to start to think of ways moving into our 50th year anniversary in 2025. In 5 years, that's 50 years, to really find ways for our community to civically engage, to be counted, to be represented. And we can start doing that even from our homes with supporting this bill and looking at ways where we can engage online. And I'll go ahead and end it there. I know it is a bit of a solemn time for educating, mobilizing, honoring, celebrating our communities, but it is important to note that we can still find ways to come together because of our resilient history, where our elders have come from, that we can continue that with being able to support one another through better representation and doing things like civic engagement, getting counted in census. So I will end it there. And if you have any questions or ideas on how better to support the bill and to outreach to one another, please do note it in the chat area, or you can send an email to myself or Alyssa at the end of the slide with our contacts. We'll go ahead and take any questions at this time, wrapping up our Census Voter Guide 45th Anniversary of Southeast Asian Resettlement Bill. And I'll hand it over to Alyssa for any last minute items.
Awesome, thanks, Sina. Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes left for questions. So if anyone has a question, again, chat it in the box, or if you want to share out verbally, feel free to raise your hand and then we can unmute your line. So we'll give folks maybe a minute or so to send us any questions, and then we can see what we can tackle in the last 10 minutes. All right, so we have one question that comes in, and it's around census. So it says, will census enumerators still be door knocking? So the answer right now is that yes, it's just that the field operations are delayed. So that non-response follow-up enumeration, so that's the census enumerators who go out to the households who have not yet responded, that's now been delayed until May. So that is why we're really drilling home responding online or over the phone, basically self-responding, so there is no need for that kind of follow-up. We're continuing to monitor how the Census Bureau will shift, just because we know, or folks are anticipating, a lot of those folks who signed up to be enumerators might not feel comfortable anymore. A lot of them tend to be older Americans, so that population is definitely should not be going out if they can help it. And they anticipated about a 60% self-response rate, so that leaves still 40% of households to follow up with. So the big push right now is to encourage your community members to respond themselves, so that when we eventually do have to look into enumeration, the number of households aren't that large, right? So that's what we're going with right now, just a delay until May, but we'll continue to monitor it, and maybe by April community call it could be completely different, but we'll keep folks updated as soon as we know. All right, let's see what other questions we have. Okay, so there's one question. It's about the census as well. This is from Her Bang. So I am presenting to a group of young adults next week who are serving an AmeriCorps year here in Wisconsin, do they fill out the census with their current residence as of April 1st or their permanent residence, knowing they may move back home after this year? So for that question, my recommendation based on what the criteria and as I've interpreted it is folks should be responding to the census based on where they live and sleep most of the time for that year. So that's why students who are studying abroad typically wouldn't be counted at their parents' home for that year, for that census, if they're not living and sleeping at home for the majority of the year. So basically the criteria that has been kind of communicated is that it's that snapshot of April 1st, 2020. So I think it's different if it's a temporary kind of like maybe, 2-month living situation, but the guidance I've always received is majority of where they live and sleep that year. If anyone has anything contrary to that, feel free to let us know in the chat, but that's the guidance we've always kind of gone by. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Can we share info and slides with others? For sure. Do you have any resources available explaining the benefits of responding to the 2020 census for undocumented folks? We actually do. So we have a fact sheet available on our website in English and in Southeast Asian languages. So it's centered around the citizenship question, but in terms of benefits for undocumented folks, the census is meant to count everyone living in the U.S. regardless of immigration status, and any uncounted person just means less resources for their community in the long run. So that's just the messaging that we always want to uplift, is that we don't only want to count citizens, we don't just want to count green card holders. It's really just to count everyone living in the United States, because everyone living here will be, going to these schools, using these roads, going to hospitals. So we just want to make sure that everyone's counted. But Sina or Gina, feel free to hop in if you have any additional suggestions.
Sure, thanks, Alyssa. I would also just add and emphasize that undocumented citizens are still members of their community. So as a result, they still benefit from all the public assistance programs and the public resources that are funded by government funds that are allocated by the census. So things like schools, healthcare, things like that, even, roads, road repairs, construction, things like that, that all still benefit undocumented citizens despite their lack of official citizenship status. So that's what I would really emphasize for folks.
I would just add to that from what Alyssa and Gina has already shared, that I know there is a lot of fear for undocumented community members and immigrants in general in providing household information, but as Alyssa mentioned, that information will not be shared to other agencies, and there is actually a very hefty fine for any places where there is sharing that's done against the law. And also that in terms of crisis, coming from the experience of just connecting it back to our Southeast Asian community as well, who has faced a lot of displacement and having to start over and over again, that undocumented folks, and during a crisis time like COVID-19, which the entire country is impacted by, there's even more fear that is in the community, which is already existing even outside of times of crisis. And so when we have our communities counted in census, who are able to safely and comfortably apply for community safety net programs like Gina mentioned, the better we will be 10 years from now. And so what the census does is be able to project those resources out, and so we don't have to wait for a crisis like this to scramble for those resources. So I just wanted to lift up in terms of long-term planning that it's important now to do because of how often the census occurs.
And we have just a couple more minutes if folks want to just get in their last minute questions, and any questions we don't get to on the call, we can hopefully follow up with you all individually. So just maybe the last minute or so to getting your last questions, and then we'll see what we can address before we wrap up. All right, so just I think the last question we can get to, I might punt this to Sina. So this is around folks in the community who know of people who've been infected and how to deal with it.
Sure. Yeah, what a important question. I'm in Washington State, where the outbreak has definitely heavily impacted the community. There are mutual aid support networks that have come out of supporting impacted community members, as well as health officials and resources in Washington State that are have been rapidly growing. And so community members have access to GoFundMe type of support areas where they can request for financial support during this time if they're out of work or going through medical bills. There's curbside testing now that's just been made available in quite a few of cities that are seeing the need for the testing in Western Washington. We have a current stay-at-home proclamation by the governor that has been enforced, and so the majority that definitely helps prevent the spread. But for those who are worried about testing positive or being impacted, we know in Washington State, if you're showing symptoms, your primary care provider and medical professionals, when you show up to the hospital or call for an ambulance, that the first response is that there's priority for those who show symptoms. But those who are fearful that they don't have the most severe symptoms get tested. I know across the United States in general, there has been increase in requests for more test kits, and those are just unfortunately not being made available as fast as the need is. And so I would recommend looking for your mutual aid resources in your state and connecting with your public health websites and departments, because every single state has updated their public health online information to respond to this crisis right now. So every state should have some sort of phone number, testing areas that you can go to. And Washington State in particular has issued certain initiatives where utilities, rent, insurance, all those things have to be prioritized to allow for folks to not have to pay co-pays and have support funding while you're out of work. And so every state is different, though. I'd recommend looking at your state's public health websites and calling in for help if you need it from there.
Great, thanks, Sina. And just want to be mindful of time. So I'm actually going to just wrap up with a very big thank you to everyone for joining us. I know more than ever, you know, we're all busy with not just work, but also dealing with this in our personal lives. So just thanks again for joining us for the full hour. Hopefully you can make it to our next community call in April, which is scheduled for April 23rd. The registration link is in the community call links document that is in your handout section. So feel free to go ahead and register there. By that time, we'll probably have more coronavirus updates, more census updates, as well as a large portion dedicated to the 45th anniversary resolution. So with that, I'll say thank you to you all, as well as Sina and Gina. Sina and my email addresses are listed there if you need to get a hold of us after this. But with that, I'll go ahead and close out this March community call. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good one.